Right.
No problems.
Right. So, good evening, everyone. I welcome all the panelists and the participants to the webinar today that we're going to have on behalf of Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation. I welcome you all. Today, we have Dr. Radhika Anand, who would be the moderator for the session. And we have Dr. Karthik Shah from Canada, who would be the speaker. Today he's going to talk about the common misconceptions and misdiagnosis in physiotherapy and how to overcome them. A warm welcome to you, sir, and a good morning. You know, it's quite early morning in Canada today, right?
Oh, yes, it is. Thank you so much, and good evening to all of you guys.
Yeah, so Dr. Radhika Anand is the Director and Chief Physiotherapist for Rapid Religare Physio Center. She is also the Executive Committee member for BPN. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Simon.
Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karthik.
Yeah, please, you can take over, madam, and moderate the session. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Simon, for this wonderful introduction. And very good evening to all the participants. And very good morning to Dr. Karthik Shah. Welcome home through this webinar. And
oh, yes, it is
welcome. Yeah, welcome home. And welcome for the today's webinar. And this is the seventh webinar organized by the Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation. Thank you, Dr. Ayyappan, Dr. Vinod Babu, Dr. Rupa, and Dr. Sai Mahendran for the wonderful initiation and the effort during this COVID-19. And I request all the participants to mute your video and audio so that it can be very clear when the presentation starts. The topic for the day is a common misconception and misdiagnosis in physiotherapy and how to overcome them. To have a lot more awareness and visibility pertaining to this topic, I'm very glad to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Karthik Shah. Dr. Karthik, after doing his master's in physiotherapy from the prestigious Scale Institute of Physiotherapy, Belagavi, Karnataka, he started teaching at Turna Physiotherapy College, Mumbai. He also owns his single largest private physiotherapy clinic in Mumbai that is called as the Parijat Clinic. In 2012, to expand his horizon, he went to Canada and presently is doing great in Vancouver. And he owns his own clinic, which is the first multi-speciality clinic in Vancouver, which include the physiotherapy, kinesiology, counseling, dental hygiene, and active rehab. And he also owns a Canadian incorporation company called as Into Canada. This is his passion to teach and train the physiotherapists all across the world to enhance their skill and help them to prepare for the licensing in Canada. And he'll be throwing more light into this about his company at the end of the presentation. Participant, please be patient and wait for his presentation in the end of the topic. So it's a very unique company which helps you guys to write from the initial paperwork and getting assured jobs in Canada as a fully licensed physiotherapist. Thank you, Dr. Karthik, for this all your effort. And he also believes in spreading the knowledge. And he also believes in spreading his knowledge from the Indian and Canadian experience, what he gained, to spread everyone. And presently, he has a candidate all over the world enrolled Into Canada. Am I right, Dr. Karthik?
Yes, that's right. All the continents
thank you
except
so
for
much.
Arctic and Antarctica.
Okay. Participants, if you have any questions, please feel free to send through the chat box, and all your queries will be answered at the end of the session. And then this webinar also live on a Facebook and YouTube. So would like to I request all the participants to share this webinar in your social networking. So with this, any further delay, over to you, Dr. Karthik. And before your presentation, before your presentation, little light on your what is your COVID at Canada, because today I see there's a 78,000 cases in the active cases.
Yes.
And so how you cope up with this, how the government is supporting the physiotherapy and rehab centers. Can you show a little light on that? And over to you, Dr. Karthik. And we welcome you once again.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for the kind words. And Welcome everybody. We are going to have a very interactive sort of a session. So if you have any questions, any queries, just put it up in the chat bar. I may not be able to look at all the questions while I am doing the workshop, but at the end, we will definitely answer those. Situation over here in Canada is we are right now in phase 2. So phase 2 means we are opening up slowly. There are cases, but as we know, India is very populated, Canada is not. So we have, just like we have different states in India, we have different provinces in Canada. So some of the provinces are very hard hit, which are on the east side. I stay in British Columbia, which is Vancouver. And over here, it's not that rampant, but yes, there is a scare, there's a fear everywhere. And right now, people are doing much more better. So today onwards, we are going to be opening up our clinics, our hair salons. Some of the restaurants are being opened up. And then we also have a lot of care that we are going to be taking. So I am right now at the clinic, and we have the PPE, masks, gloves, and face shields that are ready. So once the patients start coming in, we will be doing that. The government has been super supportive about all of these things. So what we have gotten is whoever has been cut off from their work because of this COVID situation, everybody gets 2,000 Canadian dollars every month, which is almost 1 lakh rupees. And that is going to make a benefit to everybody. So it doesn't matter that you were earning $1,500 or you were earning $15,000 for your sustenance. What is required, they are giving it to you. So that way, it is a very good thing that the government is doing. Also, they have kept all the essential services open. Just like in India, I've been following news from India because I am from India, so my heart goes out to India. And we have so much of the frontline workers who are putting in their time, money, energy into just healing us, and that's a fantastic thing. Over here, we have the same thing. In India, I remember there was a time where you used to go out on the balcony and you were ringing bells. In Canada,
Yes.
every single day at 7 p.m., everybody goes out in their balconies and they ring bells or make sound to help those people who are in the frontline work and to thank them. And every single day this is happening.
Oh, that's great, Karthik.
All right, so we are going to start off with our presentation. I'm going to be sharing a screen, and this would be, so what I'm going to do is we are going to try to touch up upon some topics that I feel have commonly been in the practice that we do. And while we do this practice, we have a very common misconception of missing out on all of those things. So sometimes it so feels to us that when a patient comes to us and says, oh, my pain is there, I'm not feeling fine, we tend to think about a lot of different diagnoses, but sometimes we may not be asking the correct questions. And when we don't do that, we don't get the correct answers. So when we don't get correct answers, what we tend to do is we tend to assume or presume that this person may be having either a psychosomatic problem or they are just bluffing. They don't want to go to work. That is why they are saying that they're having pain. But sometimes, yes, it may be possible, but sometimes it is so that we may be restricting ourselves in asking those questions. And that is exactly what we are trying to touch base upon. So my entire webinar today is going to be based upon A to Z of physiotherapy. We are going to talk from A, which is going to be some topics from A, and it will go all the way till Z. At any given time, you feel that you're not able to hear me clearly, or you're not able to see the screen, do let me know or the moderator know, and we will try to work it out with that. So with that, I'm going to start sharing the screen. And here we go. So in this particular scenario, we are going to talk about the ABCs of physiotherapy. And here, this is my company. This is called as Into Canada. I have given it a tagline of revolution of education with an emphasis on evolution of education. The reason why we want to evolve this education is that not that you do not know anything or I am going to teach you something which you don't know. The thing is we have to evolve with that. Earlier in physiotherapy, we used to have hot packs, which were dipped in hot water and then we used to place them. Right now, we use over here electrical heating pads, which are much more convenient, much more safer, much more easier to use, and it has evolved. So it's not that we don't use the same thing, we are using the same thing. Just to give you my history, I come from a family of physiotherapists. My mom is also a physio. So when she used to start her practice, and she still practices in Mumbai, when she used to practice, she had a box this big, which was just the ultrasound therapy box. Right now, we have an ultrasound therapy box, which is probably the size of my mouse. And that is basically the difference. That is what evolution is all about. And that's what we are going to try to do right now. So my name is Karthik, and I'm here because I love to make life easy for everyone. And why I'm going to make life easy for you is because you're going to start practicing in a much more enhanced way if it works for you guys. Globally, a physiotherapist is expected to assess and diagnose the problem and then plan and provide treatment programs that aim to restore the function or minimize dysfunction after disease or injury. This is achieved through a combination of manual therapy, movement training, and use of physical therapy and electrophysical agents. Now, why would I say this? Because if you see this screen here, I have Into Canada written down over here, which is my Vancouver site, and then we have it in India as well, which is the Indian site. Both of these areas, there are so many similarities that I've seen, and there are so many things that I have observed that it is just the same. There is no difference in that. Fortunately for us, any physiotherapist, and my candidates are all across the world. If you see this, we have people in Australia, we have people in UAE, we have people in Europe, we have people in USA, we have people in Canada. So all of those people study from the similar books, Maggie, Kistner, Sullivan, which we have already done. But what we don't do is don't go back to the basics. We don't go back to the core essentials of that. And that is the reason why we sometimes feel that we are getting misdiagnosed. Now let's start with the topics that we are going to cover up with. These are our roles and responsibilities, wherein we perform spinal or peripheral mobilizations. We assist in reduction of pain or swelling. We retrain patients to walk with using devices or something of that sort. We can also work upon developing with premature babies or planning cerebral palsy assessments and treatment programs. And we also work with something which is called as a team, which is health professionals, orthopedic doctors, cardio doctors, nurses, social workers, psychiatrists. So those people are going to be a part of our team where we are going to be able to heal that patient better. What we need to have in us is a genuine interest for care for people. We have analytical and personable appearances, as well as we have an analytical and personable mindset, which makes us easy to get through to the patient. And I've seen a lot of people happen, or rather think about it in such a way where they feel that, okay, I am a physio, I am a god. I don't want to talk about your problems. I just want to know your pain and I'm going to treat it. Will it work? Probably not. What we want to do is we want to come down to their level first. If they match our level, they will open up to us and they will give us all the information that we are actually looking for. And when we do that thing, we are going to be at a much more better advantage to heal the patients. As of right now, I presume that it is Tuesday, 7:30, 8 o'clock in India. And all of you guys who are watching this thing, you have spent your time, money, energy, and you have invested this thing to learn something new, which is an amazing initiative by all of you guys. So I would like to congratulate all of you over that. And I would say that you all have a very high level of initiation. You have a very high level of prioritizing things. And this is an amazing way of we being able to share knowledge all across the world. So let's start with A. And A stands for ACL tear. This is in my clinical practice that I have been doing in the past. We have seen that ACL has been one of the most misdiagnosed injuries. 90% of the times, if a person comes to you 55 years of age and says, okay, I'm having knee pain, our mind directly goes towards, oh, this person may be having probably osteoarthritis, or they may have osteoporosis, or he may have rheumatoid arthritis, or they have basically just sprained the leg. But we never go in for the details of thinking about the ACL ligament. And why is that? Because this is the ligament that connects the femur to the tibia, and it is an important stabilizer of the knee. Now, we have a common misdiagnosis that happens, which is the people think that ACL injuries will happen mostly in sports people. So they are basically running and they have twisted their leg and then they have the ACL injury. But what commonly I have seen in the past is ACL injuries happen if you're running to catch a bus, you are running to catch a train, you are running to go to work, you have been trying to get down from the stairs. It can happen with every single thing. But our common misconception is that it happens because of any kind of sports injuries also, which is not the scenario. Now, what do we do for ACL surgeries? In Canada, when we work over here, we see that in ACL injuries, most of the times, the surgery itself can be avoided if proper physiotherapy is done. And that would mean it would have been much more better off than going in for surgery and then going in for post-surgical rehabilitation. So that is one aspect that I feel would be important for us to understand. And where do you see that, or where do you learn for it? Again, we go down to the basics. Kistner, Sullivan, Maggie. B stands for back pain, which means common treatments for back pain. We have hands-on therapy, we have muscle therapy, we have core muscle training, we have range of motion exercises, soft tissue exercises, we have ergonomic advices, thermal things like heat and ice. Now, the thing is, I would like to put it up in a way where, let's suppose that I'm having about 50 different types of instruments that I can use. But am I going to use all 50 on them? Probably not. And we are going to try to today find out on what we will use and why we will use that. And that's what exactly this entire webinar is going to be all about. So we'll try to cut it down into what is important for the patient and what works for the patient. So in the major sources of pain, we have two types of pain mainly for the back. One is the cervical pain and one is the lumbar pain. Now, cervical pain can be poor neck muscle strength, either poor shoulder girdle strength, dysfunctional or sedentary lifestyles, ergonomics, trauma, awkward sleep positions, so on and so forth. Whereas with lumbar pain, it can be a lot of different things. And as I used to read, I have read it somewhere that back pain is the price that we are going to pay for standing erect on our 2 feet. So we basically are evolving. Again, the topic today, or the keyword today, would become evolution, I guess, because from monkeys, which were on all fours, we have come up to be erect. And when we become erect, at that time, we have strained our back so much that we will end up with back pain. When I was studying in KIPT, or KLE's Institute of Physiotherapy in Belgavi, Karnataka, I did a thesis on lumbar back pain. And when I did that thesis, my first line was, the world is divided into 3 kinds of people. People who had back pain, people who have back pain, and people who will have back pain. So everybody in the world is going to suffer from that. We just have to make sure that it is not going to be too overwhelming, that they may not be able to function in their normal day-to-day activities. And we will try to work upon how do we work with that. So looking at back pain, my most common question that is asked to me during my workshops or my seminars are, do we use heat or do we use cold? Now, a very simple thing is, try to touch that patient. Try to touch the patient, try to see if there is any kind of warmth, if there is any kind of redness, if there is any kind of swelling. Now, if there is any sign of inflammation, which is acute, I would always prefer to use ice there rather than heat. That is the reason why it is going to subside it. When we use it in a chronic condition, when we use it in a pain which is going to be going on for a longer period of time, where there is no heat involved, where you are going to touch that area and you don't find it too hot, it is possible to use heat over there. And in that itself, your treatment can become much more better. And that's what we will try to do. So if you on touch, on palpation, if there is tenderness, if there is warmth, if there is any cardinal signs of inflammation, which was rubor, tumor, dolor, calor. Rubor means redness, tumor means swelling, dolor means pain, calor means heat, and functio lysa, which was loss of function. If you have any of these cardinal signs, I would prefer to use ice instead of using heat therapy. C stands for cerebral palsy. Again, a lot of people think about it. This is not a misdiagnosis because the diagnosis comes from a pediatrician. But the common misconception is that we limit ourselves into treating those kind of children. And the reason why we limit is because in our mind, we have studied about the etiology, we have studied about the pathophysiology, we have studied about the prognosis and the diagnosis. And sometimes in the back of our mind, we feel that, okay, probably this person is not going to live long. They are not going to be able to do any regular day-to-day activity. So it's okay if we are going to scrunch upon not doing the stretching well, or we are not going to do the treatment well. And I personally have done this thing that when we were treating these patients, we used to feel pity for them. Do not feel pity for them. You need to make sure that those people are at par with you. The people who are suffering from, I wouldn't say suffering from, who are diagnosed from cerebral palsy, those people have an equal right to live. They have an equal right to be at par with us and work with us. And that is exactly what we want to do with them. So I would say we go even one step further than treating our regular patients, and we work with people who have cerebral palsy, and they can be eased out into the treatment part of it. So we have spasticity, we can reduce that. We have ample amount of techniques and therapies that we can work with spasticity. We have dyskinesia where we can work with them. We have ataxia where we can work with those things. Now those exercises, those protocols probably is for one other workshop that we can do for. But if you want to go down to the basics, nothing better than Sullivan, which gives us all of these things broken down into the basics. When we talk about the D part of it, it is called as the disc bulge. Now, a very common misconception that we have is disc bulge is going to be PIVD. PIVD means prolapsed intervertebral disc or a slip disc. Now, remember that those discs are not only possible in the back. The disc can be even the meniscus that is going to be in the knee. So a lateral meniscus or a medial meniscus, or even in the shoulder, when we have a slap lesion, there is a discal movement that is involved. And those things will be useful when we are going to make sure of the therapies or the treatments. Pain relieving techniques, manual therapy, core muscle strengthening, the strengthening of the hips and neural mobility techniques. All of these things are important for us so that we can understand how do we go about with these things. The functional exercises that we tend to give these people is, again, one more common misconception is that when a person is having a PIVD, they should be completely bedridden. They should have complete bed rest. Evidence-based practice suggests that if you're going to have complete bed rest for another 10 days, 15 days, you're going to be wasting those muscles. You're going to be making that thing more worse. Some people have this notion of, will I lie down on a flat plank, or I lie down on the floor, I will feel better with PIVD. No, normally no, because you have been sleeping on your same bed for the last years, months. And after that, when you're going to change your position and going to lie down on the floor, it probably will not work. Evidence-based practice suggests that mild exercises, gentle stretching, gentle movement exercises, range of motion exercises are better to heal the PIVD rather than just lying down with bed rest. So that is a very common misconception that happens, and we have seen this thing with evidence-based practice that it has been important for us to do mild movements. Now, again, we can have another, all of these topics that I'm talking of, probably they can be, each of these can be a seminar in their own. But right now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to cover up as many possibilities as possible, and then we will work upon those things very slowly and steadily. E is for ergonomics. Now, normally when we have been giving ergonomic assessments or ergonomic treatments to patients, we have this habit of making the person, I'm going to try to see if I can do an annotation over here. So we have a habit of using, I'm going to try to see, erect posture. So you are going to sit at an angle of 90 degrees, and that is what is going to be best for us. So if the head is over here and the person is sitting with the back erect, with the leg at 90 and with the feet at well rested positioning, then you are at a good space. Now, ever think about sitting in a car or going in a plane? You always know, you always see that this angle is slightly tilted and it is about at 110 degrees rather than being at 90 degrees. The common misconception is that if we are going to sit at erect 90-degree posture, you are going to be at the best posture possible. But remember that when you are going to be at a 90 position, you are also trying to load your spine at the max, because you are going to be at a vertical region on the ground as well. And because of that, you are going to be loading your spine too much. So a slight deviation going backwards is going to make much more of a difference and much more of an advantage for you rather than going in for any kind of straight back sitting. So all these car companies that we talk about, Hyundai, Nissan, Mercedes, Maruti, they have spent millions of dollars in ergonomic advising for their cars. And all of those cars have a slight tilt. So think of it in that way. You are not going to make sure that your patient is going to sit erect. It is not possible. Humanly, it is not possible to be keeping our spine at 90 degrees. It is always better to get slightly bent. It's about 110 degrees. I wouldn't say too much, because then it is going to be sleeping and the person is not going to work. So we don't want to do that. But what we want to work upon is a very specific ergonomic thing. If you go to PubMed, which is an amazing source for all the ergonomic journals, you will find out that there are so many articles that are written down about posturing. And that would work very well for you guys. F stands for falls. Now, falls means we are going to have strategies that we use for falls. We have balance strategies. Now, balance strategies stand for the three basic criteria that we use when we are going to be having a fall. We either can manage it with the ankles, we either manage it with the hip, or we manage it with a step forward. In all of these three aspects, we need to be training our patients if they are at a risk for falls. Let's suppose the person is having hemiplegia or paraplegia or Parkinsonisms. We are going to try to work upon those people with training them for their basic strategies. So if a step strategy is not working, maybe try the hip strategy. If the hip strategy is not working, let's try with the ankle strategy. And that would work in the benefit of the patient. So the common misconception that happens over here is this person is not able to stand. So we are going to try to make them go more onto the strength training part of it. But what about the proprioception part of it? What about the strategies part of it? If we do that, it will be at a much more better advantage to that patient, and in a lesser amount of effort, you will be able to achieve that balance in that patient. We will also have to take into consideration the factors for falls. I used to have a patient who used to be having falls every week once or twice. And we have been training them for strength training. We trained them for core exercises. We trained them for proprioception. Somehow or the other, it never worked out for him. But afterwards, when we went back to our basics and we went ahead and got some history done, we found out that the person was taking some medications and wine along with that. And because of that, when they went to the washroom in the night, they used to get a fall. So no matter how much we worked with them on making them their core strong or their balancing strong, if they're going to have wine in the night and they're going to have a medication which was not coinciding with them, they basically used to fall. And it was important for us to go back to those basics and ask them the factors of fall. It can be as silly as not wearing your spectacles and going to the washroom while in the night. It can be as simple as not having the light on and you tripping onto something on your bedroom. It can be as simple as you having an oil spill and you just slip on it and you fell down. So going back to the history part of it is very important while we are talking about fall. The second thing is the work balance scale that we talk about. Normally we have studied these things in our BPT or MPT and then just forgotten about it. It is a very essential aspect of documentation, and it will give us a very objective way of measuring this thing. If I'm able to do a chat thing here, I'll try if I can do that, but I would like to know that we have all studied in this thing, and ma'am, Radhika ma'am, you also may be able to give me some light on that. We have been having all these muscles that we study, all these systems that we study, they come from
Yes,
Greek
Dr.
and
Kant.
Latin.
Yes.
They come from Greek and Latin. So we have latissimus dorsi, we have pectorals, we have rhomboids. All of those words come from Greek and Latin. Now we have to remember that we have had in India, we had Charaka, we had Shushruta, who was the father of surgery of the world. They basically started off much before Greeks and Latins. But why is it that we don't have any kind of nomenclature from the Indian side? Why don't we call this, why do we call this biceps, which is a more Greek and Latin term, rather than calling it something with India? Why do we have musculature names, which is from Greek and Latin? Anybody has any ideas? Our medicine was much way ancient than the Greeks and Latins. Our treatments were much more ancient. Recently, I was reading an article that surgeries of cataract used to happen about 3,000–4,000 years ago in India. So why is it that we do not have that kind of nomenclature and we have the Greek and Latin thing that we follow? Anybody has any ideas? I'll try to see if I can get that.
Dr. Karthik?
Yeah. I'm trying to see if somebody's put up anything in the chat bar. Yes,
she's
exactly.
writing.
Yes, there are so many people who are giving us the right answer.
Lack of documentation.
Lack of documentation, exactly. That is exactly what the problem. So the Greek and Latin people, they wrote it down, okay, pectoral muscle. So we are also thinking about pectoral muscles. The Greek and Latin people said we are going to put it up as latissimus. So we put it up as latissimus. We have yoga, which has now converted into yoga, where people have been trying to make sure that they have again evolved it, and they have made it into power yoga, they have made it into hatha yoga, they have made it into hot yoga, they have made it into dance yoga. Those things are very well documented, but in our particular scenarios, our problem is documentation. Even as of right now, I would say 90% of Indian physiotherapy people or practitioners, they do not have any documentation. The documentation is in the hands of the patient, where they have written down, okay, exercise given, prescription done for knee range of motion, exercise range of motion, strengthening, stretching. And that paper is with the patient. It is not with us. How would we know after 2 years that the patient has come to us and they are going to be getting the same thing? So in our scenarios, documentation is very important. The difference in between Canada and India that I've seen is, in Canada, every single thing is documented. Even if the person is having a pain which is not related with that. So let's suppose a patient walks in and says to my physiotherapist that, okay, I'm going to be having pain in the back. So I will document it. The patient has pain in the back, suffering from 1.5 months, and on a VAS score, it is at 8/10. But if he also says that I'm going to have pain in my ankle, I will make a note of it. And when I make a note of it, it will be easier for me to understand that thing, that after 2 years or 3 years, when the person comes back to me and says, okay, I'm having pain in my ankle, we have a record that, okay, at that time also you had the same pain. Is it the same pain or is it different? And our treatment protocol will be much more better, because at that time the patient also may not remember, you may also not remember. So documentation is of very, very high importance for us. I'm going to try to get this one out. There we go. So F also stands for foot issues. A lot of people find it difficult that we have sprains, strains, infections, contusions, bone spurs. Now, the most common misconception is a differentiation in between plantar fasciitis and calcaneal spurs. Very, very similar outlooks, very, very similar presentations, very, very similar treatment programs. But the only thing that you want to understand is, are you going to work upon the entire of your foot or the arch of the foot for plantar fasciitis, or are you going to work upon the heel, which is for calcaneal spurring? And for that, you can either resort to an X-ray or an MRI, which will show you a spur, or you can do an assessment. And that assessment is right now very well given in our orthopedic assessment by Maggie, which is a textbook that we all have read. So if you want to go ahead and learn about those things, you should go back to your basics. You should go back to your roots. And coming from me, I used to teach in Terna Physiotherapy College in Mumbai. I teach here in Canada. Every single time that I still go back to the books and I open up the book and I read, I find out something new from there. And it is always easy, or it is always interesting to see that this thing also exists, and I probably have always skipped it out. So it is important for us to go ahead and see the assessment, see the things that are already written down in the books that we have already read and gotten away with. So my sincere suggestion to you guys is, please read those books once again. Maybe we will learn something better out of it. H stands for hip replacement. Now this hip replacement thing is called as also the total hip replacement. There are three basic things that we have to work upon. The important aspects that we want to work upon is these. So one is, we do not cross our leg for more than 20 to 30 degrees. A very simple reason, they will pop the artificial limb out of the socket. We do not go beyond the 90 degrees over here. The reason, again,
excuse me, Dr. Karthik.
Yes, please.
Dr. Karthik, the slide is not moving. Yeah. Can you just, it's not visible.
Slide is not visible? Let me check.
Yes, yes. It's just not moving, you know, from F.
Okay, now is it clear?
Yes, now, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so H was for hip replacements, where we do not go from beyond 30 degrees of lateral or medial rotation. We do not go more than 90 degrees of flexion, because we will again risk removing that joint from the artificial socket that we have. The same thing holds true for the abduction or the abduction. And this is going to be essential for us so that we can get a good, easy recovery and prognosis for the patients who have done this thing. Now, the next thing that stands for is the I for idiopathic pain. Idiopathic pain is a pain which we cannot identify organically, or we think that it is in a psychological process. The most common aspect that I have seen with idiopathic pain is when we ask them questions that are not relevant. But I'm going to give you guys a trick today, which will give us a lot more insight into getting more about, or rather thinking more about non-idiopathic pain and trying to reach a diagnosis there. The number one thing that we want to talk about is fibromyalgia. Now, this is a very common misconception that we have, that in India, we don't have fibromyalgia, but we have a lot of cases of fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is characterized by multiple sites of pain. We may have females coming in and they would have said, oh, my pain is in the neck, my pain is in the back of the shoulder, my pain is in the hip, my pain is also in the arm. And then some days they will come to you and say, oh, my pain is only in the neck and in the arms, but not in the back. Then they'll say it is behind the knees. So we think that, okay, these people may be probably just faking it. They don't want to just get well, or they're trying to take sympathy from the world. And that is why they're telling you about these things. But no, it is very much possible. So for diagnosing fibromyalgia, the 3 cardinal questions that you want to ask them is, in the past 2 years, do you have any traumatic event in your life? It can be death of a loved one. It can be a motor vehicle accident. It can be a traumatic injury that you would have had, a fall, or any kind of thing which would have shaken you from the core. Some people even had fibromyalgia because of demonetization, but that's a different story altogether. So that trauma is not what we are talking about. We are talking about a physical trauma that they would have suffered from. So that is one aspect that could have been there. The second aspect is, do their pains come in pairs? So does the pain in the neck be the same on both the sides? Is the scapular pain on both the sides? Is the hip pain on both the sides? Is the PSIS painful on both the sides? Are the knees painful on both the sides, or the wrist or the elbows are painful on both the sides? When we break it down, they would have about 11 to 18 different points which would be tender, which would be trigger points, which could be painful. And if that is the scenario, most probably they are not faking the disease or disorder. It is, they are suffering from fibromyalgia, and we should be able to work with them on treating them for fibromyalgia rather than thinking about it that they are psychosomatic and they're not having any kind of problems. So that's basically what I would want to talk about. J is for justifiable treatment. Now, when I started off this company into Canada, we were talking about how to go about with launching it, how to go about with working on it. So Into Canada is one of those rare companies which is completely paperless. We do not use paper at all. The reason is, one is eco-friendly. The second thing is, right now we are at such a phase in life where everything is online, including this webinar which we are having online. So when I send you something through my company, it comes into your email and stays forever. Papers can get lost. Emails will never get lost. You will always have access to your emails. You will always have access to a computer. If not a computer, it's on your tablet, it's on your mobile phone. It can be everywhere. So we use it that it is going to be completely ethical and eco-friendly. The second aspect that we wanted to do was, because we are a Canadian incorporation company, we had thought about that. Again, I'm talking about my company because we are going to try to correlate it with the treatments that we do. So one was getting paperless, so put everything up online. It is easier for you to understand and document things. And right now there are amazing softwares that are available in India. I have a clinic in India and I use that software quite a bit over there. I have a clinic in Canada which we use a Canadian software, and they are mind-blowing. They can do everything. They can even send a text message to your patients 2 hours before, so that they know that, okay, now your appointment is due. They can even send an email of welcome. Right now we are in this COVID situation. So yesterday my team, it sent out an email to about 147 people who are registered for today. So they will know that, okay, today we are opening up the clinic and you can come in and book your appointments as you want to. So it becomes very easy. We don't have to give a call to everybody and talk to them. We don't have to send out letters nowadays. We don't have to go knocking on the doors and tell them those things. So it is becoming very, very easy. The second aspect is, keep very clear boundaries. This we will do, this we will not do. So if a person comes to you and says, okay, I want the treatment for my ankle and for my knee and for my back and for my head, probably you are not in a position where you can spend that kind of time and energy to give them all that treatment in one go. So probably you will have to prioritize that, and then you will work with those. You will also have to respect the inside and outside of the profession. Sometimes you may get papers, reference papers, which will say wax therapy for knee joint, and they will give it to you. You will laugh in your mind. It's like, what kind of doctor will give us wax therapy for knee joint? It is either for ankle or for hand probably, but not for for the knee. Most of the times we have seen is they have also restricted knowledge about what we can do or what we are aware about. So probably we should work as a team, and we have to go ahead and enhance those doctors, tell them that we have these advanced techniques now which we can work upon. When they studied their education and when they had the concept of physiotherapy, their mind was restricted to infrared radiations, to shortwave diathermy, to wax therapy, and that is what they are going to prescribe you. So my suggestion is, go ahead and meet those people and try to talk to them and say, okay, we have these advances. We need to educate you about this, and because of that, the patients will start feeling better with that. We will also protect the rights and privileges of the profession. In India, I have seen this. In Malaysia, I have seen this. In China, I have seen this, that doctors per se are treated as gods. And when we get that status, we also have that in our mind. We can do no wrong, or no wrong will happen to us. But remember, we are all humans after all. So sometimes, it's very funny to say, but since the last 3 days, I have been personally suffering from a very heavy back pain. And that back pain was caused because of a stupid decision of mine where I lifted up a bag which was heavier than what I could actually take up. Now, the reason why I'm saying this thing is because when we do these things, we think that, okay, this is fine, I can manage this. But at times,
Hope you're doing well now.
I'm doing okay right now. I'm doing okay right now. I'm in my comfortable chair, so I'm perfectly fine right now. The problem will be when I get up.
Okay.
Okay, so K stands for the knee pain. Now again, we discussed it in the first slide, which was ACL injuries. Knee pain is one of the most commonly treated things that we do these days. And when we have injuries, when we have sort of levels, there are very specific or simple tests that we can perform. And once we do that thing, we can rule out all types of problems in just one simple shot. I'll try to, can you guys see my video? Or is the screen only on?
No, Dr.
Only
Karthik, only your slides are there. Slides are.
Only the slides are going on, right?
Only the slide.
Stop the sharing, and I'm going to start the
Yes,
video
yes.
because I want to check once if we can do that. Let's see if I can go there. I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible. But let's suppose the person comes to you with the knee. I, of course, cannot show you my knee. So I'm going to try to make it easy by looking at this and making these our legs, and this is our knees. So what we want to do is, when the patient comes to you with knee pain, our basic idea is to start assessing them. And when we want to assess them, we are going to go very, very slow, very, very smooth with them. So what we want to do is we are going to make them lie down straight. Now let's work upon just one knee here. And the first thing we want to do is to ask them to bend the leg. They are, of course, on a couch. So they will bend the leg, and we will see for a sag sign. If we see a sag sign, that means that the posterior ligament is weak or it is damaged. If we do not see that, we will try to push it further and see a posterior drawer test. If that is okay, then we pull it forward, which will come up as an anterior drawer test. If that is also okay, the next thing we want to do is straighten the leg, take it in our hand, hold it and push it from outside, push it from inside. What we did here was a simple test for a valgus and a varus test. Once that is done, we are going to try to bend the knee, and we are going to twist it a bit and take it forward. And then we are again going to bend it, twist it the opposite way and take it forward. What we did here was we were testing for ligaments and meniscus injuries. If all of these things will give you one or the other diagnosis. If not, ask them to lie down prone, bend the knee. We have the prone knee bending test. So we bend the knee, we will just push and rotate it medially, we'll rotate it laterally, see if there is any pain. If not, we distract and we pull it up. In 5 minutes, we can do all of these knee tests. This would include everything: Aplis, McMurray's, valgus, varus, ACL, PCL, medial meniscus, lateral meniscus, and it becomes very easy for us to go through all these different aspects of the knee joint and reach a diagnosis within 5 minutes of our assessment. So that becomes very, very easy, and that is important for us to know, because sometimes we miss out on these things. Now, all of these things, again, as I keep on saying, that we need to go down to our basics. We need to go down to our regular things that we have already read. So amazingly well given in Maggie. Right now, the latest edition of Maggie is in such a beautiful way they have made it that they have marked all the evidence-based practices or tests in green markers. So wherever you see green, it's an evidence-based test. One of the most commonly thought of or done thing is the straight leg raise test. If I ask all of you guys who are around here, I'm not sure how many people we have here, but yeah, we are almost 100 people here. And if I ask you guys the straight leg raise test, you will tell me, ask the person to lie down straight, ask them to lift up the leg, go down, second leg, lift up, go down. And if there is pain, they are positive. We have forgotten that we would want to go down to the basics first. And the basics are, the straight leg raise test is never done straight legged. It is always done with us holding it, going medially. So we go adduction, medial rotation, and then we take it up, which we have read about but forgotten. 90% of the people over here would give me the same answer. Now, this test is still not complete. After this, if there is no pain, you are going to do a dorsiflexion. If at that time still there is no pain, you are going to do a head flexion. And after that, if there is no pain, then the test becomes complete. But we never go to that level, because in our mind, we have this thing, okay, SLR, lift up the leg, done. Test negative. So one of the most important aspects that we think of is going back to our basics and understanding if what we are doing is the right thing or the wrong thing. And this is not something that I would talk about India or about Canada. I would say worldwide, we have this habit of skipping steps. And when we skip steps, we commit blunders. So we'll make sure that we go down to the basics of this, and then we will talk about this. I'm going to go back again to sharing the screen. So I assume that we will not be able to see my video there, but we will try to work upon.
Yes.
So can you see my video now?
Yes, yes, Dr. Karthik. Not the video, the slide.
You see the slide now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now what
That's for
happens
L,
here,
L.
Yeah, we see L is for ligament injury. In the ligament injury, the most commonly seen injuries are the knee and the ankle. But what we have commonly missed out is the TMJ joint, the temporomandibular joint, which is also one of the important aspects which in India, because of the usage of tobacco related products, because of the pan, because of the chewing tobaccos, because of gutkhas, it has become so rampant that people cannot open their mouth for more than one finger these days. If they have to have a pani puri, it is difficult for them. They have to crush it and they have to eat it. It is that bad. Again, I speak from experience, but you may have different experiences in different parts of the country. But I come from Mumbai, where pani puri is one of the best street foods that we have. And of course, I miss it because I am here in Canada. So that being said, we are going to be working over the TMJ, we work upon the ankle, and we work upon the knee joint. And when we work upon these things, the ligament injuries are a little more difficult to work with rather than the muscular injuries, but it also becomes super easy when we have understood that this problem is coming from there. Now we're going to talk about Another thing which is called as the meniscus injuries. And when we talk about meniscal injuries, we have medial, lateral meniscus, and then we also have the signs and symptoms that come up. So we have to think about, or we have to go about and read popping, locking, tests, what are available with us, what we want to perform. And is it degeneration? Is it traumatic? Or is it mechanical? Is it because of pain? Is it because of swelling? Or is it because of stiffness? And these things are important for us to understand and work upon those things. N is an entirely totally new topic, which is a neurological topic. We have cerebrovascular accidents, we have multiple sclerosis, we have ALS, we have GBS, we have all types of post-polio syndromes that we have, the peripheral nerve injuries, we have the reflex sympathetic dystrophy, and we have mobility issues. Now, all of these things that we are talking about, we tend to get into the details about working on those things because we have studied those neurological aspects. But what we do not have understanding with is we want to work from the bottom downwards. So if the person is able to, this is something that my principal used to teach me, and I would love to teach it to you guys as well. If the person is able to sit, don't make them lie down. If the person is able to stand, don't make them sit. If the person is able to walk, don't make them stand. We always go to the next level of function rather than treating them on the same level of function. And when we do that, we are at an advantage because we will try to push them to the next level up. And that will mean that we will try to get them much more better faster. When we talk about outcome measures, very rarely do we use this thing because we do not have documentation in our practices normally. So when we use these documentations like Berg Balance Scale, which I said earlier, or the Hoehn-Yahr scale, which is for Parkinson's disease, or the walk test. These walk tests are very, very important. And when we do it, like all my physios over here in Canada, we have a timed up and go test, which gives us in an instant effect of if this person is going to be at a risk of fall or no. It's a 15-second thing. And in 15 seconds, we can figure out if the person is going to get a fall in the coming days or is at a risk of fall or no. So those things are very important for us to do and assess. Most of the physios I've seen over here also, they tend to go into the basics of going in for active range of motion, passive range of motion, resisted range of motion. Then they do MMT and then they're done. But if we go one step ahead and put in about 5 minutes more and do some special tests or do some of these outcome measures, it will make a huge difference, and that will make our treatment go very effective and their prognosis becomes very, very easy. O stands for osteoarthritis, which is the risk factors that we're talking about. We have a lot of people who go in for increasing age or gender or obesity. Some of these are risk factors which are reversible, some of them are not. Whatever is reversible, we have the opportunity over here to educate that patient and work with them and make them go much more better than going in for telling them about just the therapy that we are talking about. So a common misconception is that, okay, this person is going to be, let's suppose he's having a sports injury. We cannot tell him you should stop playing sports. But what we can tell him is that we will basically try to work upon not going in for sports without warm up and cool down, not going in for sports without any kind of pre-training to be done. So those things are important for us, and that will enhance the quality of life. Now we have signs and symptoms over here. So again, we don't want to go into the asking and replying part of it right now because we have too many people and it would be difficult for us to work upon those things. So I would just try to skip this and I'll show you that these are called as the Hubbard's nodes and the Bouchard's nodes. However, we have to differentiate in between rheumatoid and osteoarthritis. 90% of the times the doctor who will send you the patient may have diagnosed it or misdiagnosed it. But we do not have to go on face value for all of these things. What we have to do is we need to work upon understanding that is this actually rheumatoid arthritis, or are we tending to go towards osteoarthritis? And in both the things, treatments may be similar, but not always. Parkinson's disease, again, we don't want to go too much into details of talking about it, but what we want to understand is that sometimes we may miss the early signs of Parkinson's. And those early signs would be the TRAP, or the TRAP as we call it. TRAP means there may be tremors, so people may be initially feeling the tremors, or there may be rigidity, there may be akinesia, or there may be postural instability. So TRAP is the acronym that we see for in early stages. And after that, of course, once the Parkinson's disease is diagnosed with, then it becomes very prominent. But in the earlier stages, we may have these things which can be easily diagnosed and taken care of. Q stands for quality of treatment. Now, in our therapy, we have two major aspects of it. One of it is the exercise therapy, and then one of it becomes the electrotherapy. But what we want to understand about is that these two aspects of it are our tools that we can use for making this thing in our clinical practice. And in that clinical practice, what I would want to emphasize upon is, let's suppose the patient is with you for about half an hour or 45 minutes or 1 hour at the max. These things will be handy only at that time. So that's going to be about 25 minutes at the max. But the rest of the 23.5 hours, what that patient does is very important for us. And why is that important for us? Because this will determine their more better prognosis than these 25 minutes that we're talking about. And that comes up to HEP, which stands for Home Exercise Program. When we give them a home exercise program, we need to make sure that they are adhering to that exercise program. They have understood that and they feel that it will benefit them. 90% of the times when you come back from, when a patient comes back to you and they ask you, okay, I'm not feeling too fine. And you ask them, did you do your exercises? And they're like, no, I just did it twice in the day. Will it help them? Probably not. So what our emphasis should be is that we need to make sure that they understand the importance of doing that exercise and also the benefit that they're going to get because of those things. Okay, and
Dr. Karthik?
yes, please. Go ahead.
Yes, we can go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So we have the privacy draping things that we do during the electrotherapy and the manual therapy. Again, in India, we are much more careful about it rather than being at Canada or in Europe or in Australia, where we take into consideration the privacy and the dignity of the patient. So we just don't go too much into the therapy rather than forgetting about the dignity. And in India, I would say we have been taking very good care about those things. But there are some times where there's a very thin line in between the patient feeling comfortable and not comfortable. And it is up to us to make sure that the patient or our staff. In the concepts of TENS therapy, ultrasound therapy, IFC, IASTR, which is instrument-assisted soft tissue releases, exercise therapies, or cold or hot therapies, the concepts are very simple. You are going to do two basic things. One, you are going to be working over increasing the blood flow at that specific area, which will mean that you are going to be using it to wash out all those pain-causing enzymes. And the second thing that happens is they are going to be working over getting those pain-causing enzymes out and infusing fresh blood, which comes with the nutrition of your body. So no matter what we try, we can have the pain gate theory working on the TENS. We have the piezoelectric effect or the reverse piezoelectric effect with the ultrasound therapy. But eventually our ultimate goal or the grassroots level thing is we release the pain enzymes and we infuse fresh blood, which causes the healing of the tissues. And that is what we have to aim for. Rheumatoid arthritis, we just discussed a bit earlier with what we do. And sciatica is one more important aspect that people continuously misdiagnose and treat. Well, the problem that I feel or find with this is, one, when we are treating one side of this area, which is this area, we tend to forget that all of this area is being in pain. And the patient is going to have the problems not only on this side, but because this entire area is being overcompensated. It is going to be important for us to relax this area as well, the other side of sciatica. But normally our emphasis is upon one side and we will work upon just brushing upon those things. But our idea is we tend to want to go onto the other side as well and work on both the things. Then only we are doing physiotherapy, because by definition, physiotherapy is a holistic approach. It's an approach of a whole person and not just one ankle, one elbow, one sciatic nerve, or one radial nerve. We have to make sure that this is going to be a complete treatment for all the people. And now we come down to tennis, very common problem that we see, right from Sachin Tendulkar to the person in your neighborhood. Everybody suffers from tennis elbow because of any repetitive high injury strains. And when that happens, it is important for us to also understand that these things have been taken into consideration of treatments, where the treatment is going to be as simple as basic stretching to deep tissue release, to ultrasound therapy, to ice massage, to home exercise programs. And in this particular case, as I mentioned earlier, that what the person does in the last or the next 23.5 hours before they meet you again is very important, rather than what you do in your therapy per se. So that is something that very commonly you should be taking care about. And then we have V, which stands for varicose veins. We have W is for water therapy. Now, this is one of the most common fads that have come up right now, which is the aquatic therapy. Is it helpful? Yes. But is it possible for everybody to do it? Probably not. So I cannot ask my person who's undergone a total hip replacement to jump into a pool with me and we will do exercises with them. Is it possible? Yes. But is it going to be possible all the time with all the people? No. And for that, you also will have to be present with them. In Canada, we have a whole system of aquatic therapy where we can train them in a bathtub, which is specially designed with treadmills and stuff like that. Again, those are very costly equipments. They're very costly therapies. I've seen a lot of people in India, in Africa, invest in a lot more money for machines which are costing you lakhs and lakhs of rupees. What I've tried to understand is that eventually it will boil down to what your expertise is in the training part of it. So aquatic therapy is an amazing tool. It helps you with all those principles of aquatic therapy, which is buoyancy and surface tension. But for everybody, it may or may not work. It works fantastically for burns. It works fantastically for orthopedic problems, for geriatric issues. Amazing outlooks. But With all the people, it is not possible. So if you are thinking, I want to do a course of aquatherapy, please go ahead and do it. That's not an issue. The thing is, will you be able to practice it constantly, continuously? There are amazing physios that I know of who practice it as a profession per se now. So they are only into that. They take group classes, which is an amazing idea. They do therapies which are going to be working over range of motion exercises, strength training, resistance training that happens with water. And it's fantastic. But you have to be mindful about what will work with your set of patients. If you have a clinical practice bank in the middle of a city and you want to think that, okay, I'm going to go to the pool and I'm going to stay there for 6 hours, is it going to be worth it? Think about it that way. Another important aspect that majority of us have a problem with is the X-ray interpretation part of it. Sometimes we have a problem in understanding if there is actually a fracture or was there a problem with the X-ray. Sometimes we have an issue on understanding if there was actually a lung which was collapsed or was it just the bad X-ray that was taken up. I always say in India, at least I would say X-rays are very cheap. They are not that expensive over here. If I want to take an X-ray over here, it will probably cost me about a couple of $100, which is thousands of rupees. In India, I think it's about 500 or 1,000 rupees at the max, I would say right now. How much is an X-ray roughly?
Yes. 500?
Roughly about 500.
Hello?
So if you
Yeah,
have
roughly
a doubt
500,
of
yes.
this, if you have a doubt from that X-ray that you are seeing, it is always easier to refer for one more X-ray or take a second opinion on that rather than just misdiagnosing it. So let's suppose that you have a knee X-ray, you want to take maybe a skyline view and just assess it properly. I know it is a load on the patient because we don't shell it out for them, but we can always request for a discounted price. But that being said, it is better to reach a proper diagnosis and treat them properly with spending a little more money rather than giving a false diagnosis in our mind, assuming some things and then treating them and not reaching at all into a conclusive thing or a better working prognosis. So that is one of the things that I would want to emphasize upon. And I would want to open up for questions first. So we'll basically be doing the ABC here, and then we will talk a bit more about how things in Canada are and how things are in India. So anybody has any questions, feel free to ask, or we can discuss it over the chat. I'm going to stop the screen here and we'll go back to the video.
Dr. Karthik?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. This is, thank you so much for the great presentation. Like, I think I can thank you later because since you are into the questions, because one Dr. Habibullah, his question is like, what can we do for upper back pain, that is pain in the upper thoracic vertebra due to the blood pressure? So he's just keep repeating the same questions. So I thought I'll just put it to you.
Upper thoracic pain due to blood pressure.
Yes.
Okay.
Upper back pain due to blood pressure, but he's just quoted in the bracket that in the thoracic vertebrae.
Okay. So what I would want to know is, firstly, the correlation with blood pressure and pain. I don't get it too much. But what I would want to know over here is the person having just this cause or is there another additional underlying cause as well? That is the number one thing that I would like to check. The second thing is, majority of the times the upper thoracic pain is a upper cross and the lower cross type of a syndrome. Now upper cross and lower cross, let's use my hand right here. If my this side is tight, okay, and this side is weak, no matter how much I am going to try to stretch this area, but if this is going to be tight and it is going to pull back, this is weak. And the reason why this is going to be weak is I am not strengthening this enough to hold this in a straight position. So sometimes we come across these patients who have upper thoracic pain. We have frozen shoulder, where we try to make their stretching go to the limits. We'll stretch them till it actually pains them. But all the time, do we want to actually go ahead and do that thing instead of working upon the other side as well? Like I have people who come to me and they're like, okay, we have frozen shoulder. This is something that I have experienced myself in India. And I'm going to go a little back here so that I can show you guys. So I have this patient who's able to raise his hand only till here. So what I do is I take his hand and I'm going to go all the way, going up to 90 degrees, trying to stretch him out. And then I'm like, okay, now let's lift up your hand again. And he'll go up till here, and then he'll drop down.
Okay.
Why will he drop down? Because I have given him the range of motion, but have I given him strength in that arm? Probably not. And when I have not given him the strength, he is able to do it over here. Maybe he is able to go pain-free as well. But will he be able to go up without the strength? Possibly no. And that is the reason why even with this upper thoracic area that is painful, I honestly do not get, unless I see that patient or I can get a correlation with the hypertension and with his pain, I wouldn't be able to comment on it. But I would strongly say that you should be checking them for their upper cross syndromes, wherein their pectorals may be tight and their scapular or the back muscles may be weak. And because of that, you may have an imbalance which would be causing them the pain. Another important aspect is also work upon thinking if that person has ankylosing spondylosis, which is a differential diagnosis for upper thoracic pain. You may also check if the person is having a bent back posture or a hunchback posture. You can also check about if the person is having any kind of cervicogenic headaches, because that also can radiate downwards and can cause you thoracic or upper cervical pain. So you need to figure out, is that pain, firstly, I would honestly don't want to comment upon this question being related with blood pressure, but it would be that these are your options. You probably want to check with them, and then you would have my email ID at the end of the thing.
Yes, yes. There's just a lot of questions coming up for you, Dr. Karthik.
Yeah, sure. I will be happy with that.
So how can we treat patients with a tendon transplant for a foot drop from Ramakrishna, Dr. Ramakrishna?
Okay. So tendon transfer is a very dicey topic here. Now, you want to strengthen that tendon, but you also want to make sure that because it is sutured or joint, you don't want to snap it open. So in this particular scenarios, I generally go by the protocol that the surgeons give us. Because what has happened inside that tissue or that bone, even if it is a TKR or a THR, if the doctor has said for 6 days, no weight bearing, I would not go by that. I would not do that, because the doctor has full access to that bone, that muscle. They have seen that thing and then they have diagnosed it and then they have tried to prognose it. So my suggestion is, when we come across patients like this, if it is a chronic thing, if it has been done maybe months ago and then you don't have the movement, I always go, either we go one joint above and one joint below. So let's suppose that my tendon of my PIP is ruptured and I am going to get a suturing done over here. I would probably work upon, till this thing is healed, I'll work upon the DIP, I will work upon the MCP also. And then once I am getting a green signal from my surgeon to work upon the tendon strengthening, I will go all out and try to work upon making my PIP stronger. So by that time, I have already worked upon the other musculatures, and that will make me much more at an advantage to work. Something like this we have done with prehab, which is now a very important aspect of our therapies. If it's a crush injury that the person may have had because of a ligament tissue, like in the foot, if they have had a foot drop or if they have had an injury, then probably there is no prehab. But if we have pre-mediated that surgery, we have a very high chance of working upon the other aspects of it. Like we have the pre-ambulatory training. In the
Yes.
pre-ambulatory training, we know that we are going to work over the walker, crutches, or gait aids or sticks. But what do? We strengthen the upper extremity. We strengthen the lower extremity, which is not going to be actually taking part in that walk, but it is going to help us to support it. Similarly, with tendon ruptures or tendon repairs, we work upon going in on the other aspects of it till we get a green light from the surgeon. And once the surgeon says, yes, we definitely go ahead and treat them with the strength.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Karthik. This is from Nimisha. Is there a relation between acidity and a musculoskeletal pain according to your experience?
Yes, definitely. One of the major causes of our muscle pain is the accumulation of lactic acid, as we have studied in our first year BPT. So when we have acidity, that acid is going to be produced in the stomach probably, but that acid can also be present in our other aspects of the body. And that is the reason why as physios, we recommend to keep hydrated by ourselves. We should be hydrated, and we also need to keep our patients hydrated. One of the most important aspects that we see in India is because we live in a very hot and humid climate in India. And when we do that, we have a very high tendency of losing water through sweat, through urination, through our body. So keeping hydrated and being less acidic is always better. And then in that particular scenario, I always tell a lot of people have this tendency of having sour food. Now they will squeeze a lemon on top of their sabjis or dals. They will squeeze a lemon in their juices. This is extra. Now lemon, if you realize, is ascorbic acid, citric acid. That converts into lactic acid, and that will cause pain in the area that you already have pain. Because that's going to accumulate over there, because that's the way the body heals. The body tries to supplement it by adding more and more acid onto it so that it can heal there. But that will probably lead to more pain. And that is the reason why we need to keep ourselves hydrated. And acidity and musculoskeletal pain, yes, definitely there is a connection with that. And this is there even if you want to go ahead, there is a very strong connection in the ResearchGate articles. You should probably look at those ones.
Okay. A lot of questions coming up, and is there okay to take the questions, or do you want to continue your presentation, Dr. Karthik?
We can do that. We can take a few questions and then we'll go for talking about.
This is from Dr. Danjit. Sir, can please tell me some servogenic headache management? Any idea? Servogenic headache management.
I was online in the morning while I was trying to figure out this, and there is right now Instagram live going on, which again, I don't want you to miss my show and go there, but there is an Instagram going on right now, which is about cervicogenic headaches. The basic thing is what we want to understand is that we need to understand this pain. Where is it coming from? Like whenever I used to treat my patients, I normally right now I don't do clinical practice much, but if I do have to work upon those things, I would basically go ahead and ask them the basic cause of it. And when I remove the cause, what happens normally with physiotherapists all across the world is, if this is my tree of pain, I'm going to trim the branches. But I do not go to the trunk, I do not go to the roots. And when I don't do that, I'm going to be at a loss, because I can do this will go away, but then they will again grow back. And when that grows back, you will have the pain coming in again. So you as a physiotherapist will feel that I treated that, but now it is going to come back. The reason why it is going to come back is because we have not treated it from the cause. So when we talk about cervicogenic headaches, the problem is it a postural problem? Is it a muscular problem? Is it a problem that is triggered? Like cervicogenic headaches can be triggered out with even aromatherapies. I personally have this issue when I go down to a place which is going to have a very heavy scent, jasmine scent, or right now there are so many essential oils. Every spa, every clinic puts up something or the other. If I go in with that, I will tend to get a headache. And that is nothing muscular, but it will be all over here. It will pull my entire occiput and it will be a throbbing type of a pain. Why? Because I am getting allergic to that kind of smells. So there are a lot of reasons what we can do about it. The main thing I would want to go about with cervicogenic headache is you have two things. One is rule it out from the cause. So find out what that cause is. If it is postural, chin tucks work fantastic. Chin tuck is a very simple thing. I'm going to go on a side profile. So this is basically what you want to do. You're not going to try to do up and down movement. Again, range of motions are fantastic. You do flexion, extension, side flexions, you do rotations, and you do chin tucks. Your entire neck musculature is taken care of. But that being said, if I am going to sit in a slouch position or if I'm going to be using my phone with my head bent down, I will probably tend to get that thing again. So unless I rule out the cause, I cannot work upon the treatment part of it. But those are the things. So one thing is work upon your causative factor. The second thing is work upon basics of musculature over here. Cervicogenic headache, the treatment part of it is the management. I think we want to go ahead with basic gentle massages rather than manipulations. In the head, normally do not go for manipulations. We have a very important structure there called the brain, and we don't want to damage that if you're going to just go manipulating that area. So a gentle massage works very well. Again, you guys, most of you guys who are seeing me right now are in India. In India, the worst thing you want to do is go to a barber and get a massage done. That is very heavy, and sometimes it leads to problems which are irreversible. So make sure that you're going to a guy. Okay, I'm not against massages. I'm totally pro. When I come down to India, I come down every like in a year twice, and I go for those massages. But I trust those guys who do it. But all those heavy duty massages, please avoid those things. As a physio, you're not supposed to be doing that.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions?
Okay, Dr. Karthik, there are a lot more questions. So I think you need to give them the email ID or, to answer those queries later
Sure.
on.
What
Okay.
I can do is I'm
Yes.
going to try to give you guys my
So
email ID.
one more question is keep repeating. So this is from Dr. Rohan.
Yeah.
How the square stepping exercise is effective in speed and balance improvement in older adults?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How the square stepping exercise is effective
Square stepping exercise.
is effective in speed and balance improvement in older adults.
So if you mean the Codman's exercise, which is
Yes.
the stepping in the square exercise, is it essential or is it important for us to do? Yes, it is very important. And how it will help is it works upon three things. Now, when we talked about the strategies of fall, we worked upon the three strategies. One was from ankle strategy, which again works in that square. The hip strategy, because you're going to go 90, 90, 90, you're going to get the hip strategy also. And you work upon the step strategy as well, which is you are going to step forward and you're going to turn. So all of these three things are important to form your balance. And when that is important to form the balance, when you do those exercises, they are taking these things into consideration. So it will be helpful for you in that particular scenario.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, let's start
Okay, Dr.
with
Karthik.
one.
Yes, because there are a lot more questions.
Here.
I can just, yeah.
Okay, we are going to try to go off from here and we'll start with the into Canada thing and then we'll talk about it a bit. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so let's share the screen here and then we'll talk about it. And here we have what is into Canada. Now, Into Canada is a company which is a Canadian incorporated company. And this company is formed by physios for physios. And this is going to be utilized all across the world to help physiotherapists come across into Canada in the easiest, fastest, and the most economical way possible. When we came to Canada, and I would speak for almost all the people who have been to Canada up till now. When we came over here, we had this thing where we came in after doing our permanent residency or getting a work permit or a tourist visa. We came in over here, then we started studying for examinations, and then we started working over getting jobs, which was menial jobs or survival jobs. And people have worked right from security guards to being selling vacuum cleaners, which I have done. There would be people who have sold coffees in Starbucks or sandwiches in Subway. And that thing is something that crushed me to the core. When we were talking about making something which is going to help physiotherapists all across the world, I wanted to make it in a seamless fashion that right now, whatever you are doing, you continue doing it. As and when you are going to prepare for those things, you will prepare it from your home country. You do not leave your house. You do not leave your job. You do not leave your current situation. You will prepare for everything from your home country. Once you are ready with it and once we know that you are going to be able to crack this exam, only then you come down to Canada. You give that examination. The next day onwards, you can start working. And we are assuring you with a lot of things. We are assuring you with the jobs. We are assuring you with the paperwork. We are assuring you with all kinds of services that you will require in Canada and while you are in your home country as well. So what our industry overview is that there is a very high demand of physios in Canada. Currently, there are more job openings than the number of new graduates, and employers are looking to hire qualified physios from other countries to meet their needs. The industry sources say that there is going to be an increase in the demand. We have very conflicting reports because of this COVID-19 situation as of right now, but in the last 2 weeks, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has announced that they would require 3 million people more to come to Canada to bridge that gap in. And the reason why we will need those people is because if you have taken the geography into consideration, Canada is 7 times bigger than India. But India is 10 times more populated than Canada. So the population of my entire country, which is Canada, is equivalent to a small state in India. And Canada is huge. Canada is wide, vast. We have 3 time zones. So from here, where I am in Vancouver to Toronto, it takes 5.5 hours for me to reach by plane. So it is that big. It's almost as good as you flying from India to Malaysia. And that is how we are saying that we need a lot of people to work over here. Job openings will also arise from the need to replace the retiring workers or to fill in on those on maternity leaves. Now, the thing is, we have a population which is called as the baby boomers population. After World War II, most of the people who went to war probably came back and never studied. And those people who studied at that time, which was below the age of 11 or 12, those people have now come to a point where they are retiring. So there is a huge scope, there is a huge demand of vacancies. Physiotherapists, architects, engineers. Every year, the government of Canada comes up with a lot of different options or a lot of different professions that they actually need, and they will give you the permanent residency based upon your qualifications. And when that happens, you should be ready. While there are shortages throughout the countries, there are more vacancies in metro cities like Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Ottawa, Toronto. And what happens over there is we will be able to give you a placement in whichever city you would want to, because we are tied up. Just like right now, I am sitting in Vancouver, but I am working with you guys in Karnataka. We are globally connected these days, and that is the reason why we are able to place you anywhere in the country, Canada, of course, and we will be able to help you get that job for sure. And that would be before you probably leave India as well. So everything is done for you, and all you need to do is put in your effort and put in your mind into just getting these things done for you. Work in hospitals, which are government hospitals. You can work in private clinics. You can work in home care, child developmental centers, extended care facilities. You can work with health planning agencies, or you may work as a part of a healthcare team. You can also perform many independent duties. Our average salary is between 66,000 to 95,000 a year. This is basically a government salary that we're talking about. This includes all your benefits, sick leaves, dental days, paid vacations, so on and so forth. If you're working privately, it's about 1.5 times this amount, which is roughly more than $100,000 per year. So these are your salaries, or these are the rates that you can be getting as a physiotherapist in Canada. In India, I presume that all the audience is from India, so I'm just trying to give you a comparison in between these two. So in India, we have a work culture which is going to go from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock in the evening, or probably even extend beyond that. But over here, the culture is from 8 to 4 done. Then you have time for your family, your friends, your socializations. On the contrary, when I was in India, I used to spend, again, I am not making sure that India, whatever I am right now is because of India, but I'm just comparing the quality of life that we are talking about. And I have nothing against India there. I'm just being very, very vocal that over here, we have a very amazing type of celebrations that we do. We have Diwali, we have Holi, we have Eid, we have Ramzan. Everything is celebrated with much more better fanfare than I have done it in India. One thing is working hours. Normally we work for 36 to 50 hours per week, when the pay packages are about $120 an hour. So if you work for $40 or 40 hours in the week and you're earning about $120, we are going to calculate it after all costs. You're going to earn $4,000 at least in a week, which is roughly about 2.5 lakh rupees. And that's what makes it totally different and totally worth it to work upon these things. Now, skills and education, you will require interpersonal skills, which you have, thorough understanding of anatomy and pathology. Basically, you will require a BPT degree. If you have a bachelor's in physiotherapy degree, you are eligible to come to Canada. If you are understanding what I have been saying in the last 1 hour, you are eligible to come to Canada. Why? Because they need English proficiency. So that is basically your concept. You need a band 7, and we will help you to get that band 7. If you are thinking that my English is weak, I was not a fluent English speaker, but what I have done is we have tried to work upon our limitations, and that is what is going to make us much more independent, and we can train you for those things. The third thing that you require is a valid passport. If you have a valid passport, a BPT degree, and a knowledge of what I am talking of right now, you are good to go. You can come to Canada. For requiring, as I said earlier, we need a bachelor's of physiotherapy degree. You need completion from the physiotherapy competency exam. Now, there are two types of exams that happen in Canada. One is the theory exam and one is the practical. Theory, you will require to pass that exam to give the practical exam. And we will train you for both of these examinations. We will train you with everything that you will require. We'll give you the notes, we'll give you the study materials, we'll give you the peer study group. So you will be connected with about 20-25 people all across the world who will be giving the same exam at your time. So you will be connected, and every single day or 2 days, you will be getting more and more advice on how to go about and how to prepare for those things. Along with this, we will also work over you getting settlement services. That means when you come down to Canada, we'll work with you on what SIM card you will take, what bank you can bank with, where you can stay, where you can find South Indian food, where you can find Gujju food, where you can find Punjabi food. We will guide you with those things as well. And that is basically the concept that we have. We have a start to finish thing, a one-stop shop. Everything that you will require to be a physio in Canada, we will work with you on that. Now, you will be requiring what? So your qualification is BPT, not MPT. Even if you have done MPT, they will be assessing you only on your bachelor's degree. And then we have the IELTS band 7 and the work visa or PR application. So these things, we will help you in all of these 3 things also. Now you will ask me a question which would be, I am an intern right now, or I am a final year student. Am I eligible? Yes, you are eligible right away, but your process will only begin after you have done your BPT. So once you have your degree in hand, that is when you start working. The next thing that we want to work upon is IELTS Band 7. A lot of people, I come from India and I have this feeling that if I am being judged, like right now, I know that there are about 100 people who are watching me and I don't know how many more on Facebook. But I know that I am not being judged because right now I'm coming as a resource person. But if I have to give you an examination, can I speak? Can I talk? I will think two times. So that judgment part of it, we will work with you and we will work with you on how to get that Band 7. We have our trainers in place who will work with you on this thing diligently. One more thing is, do we do immigration? No, we do not do immigration. But we can connect you with agents who are authorized by the Canadian government. Most of the people in India, I am also surprised that there are only 32 people who are actually authorized in the whole of India, in a population of 1.2 billion people. 32 people are authorized to give you Canadian immigration. And out of that, 19 are in Canada right now. So there's not many people who are authorized to do that thing. The travel agents that you're talking about, those people are not there. If you want to check that credentials of theirs, go on the IRCIC website and check their name. If that comes up on the government website, then they are valid, or else they are all faking it, they're all duping it. So don't trust that. Don't fall prey to scams. If you are an internationally trained physio, you must complete a multi-step process to work in Canada. This includes an assessment of your education, professional credentials by the Canadian Alliance of Physiotherapy Regulators. And Into Canada will assist you in preparing for your written and the practical components from the comfort of your home country as well, and without leaving your current job. So your current things will not change till you are ready to come for exams. Why would you want to come to Canada? And a lot of people have this question also, that do we want to go for Canada, or do we go to USA, or do we go to Australia, or do we go to Europe, or London? Let's break it down very simple. As of today, USA has banned immigration. There is no immigration happening in USA. All those people who are going to be in USA right now, they are also wanting to come over towards Canada right now. I've had about 7 or 8 inquiries in the last 2 weeks since the lockdown. The second option is London, which is UK. You can go there. You don't need to give any exams. You just have to give your documentation and they will accept your documentation and you will get a license to work. But will you get work? No. As of right now, I have my colleagues who have been with me, studying with me in 2000. And those people are still struggling to find work there, because there is so much of saturation over there. A lot of people of our country have gone there, been there for a year or two, and then come back frustrated. So you probably may not want to be there. The third option is Australia. Like Into Canada, there is no Into Australia unless somebody thinks of it and starts it. But we will give you Canada as a choice for 3 major reasons. One is we need you over here, so your process becomes super easy to come. The second thing is, if you stay over here in Canada on your permanent residency for 1,000 days, you can get a Canadian passport. You will become a Canadian citizen. You will get Canadian citizenship, which is unheard of in any other country. So in 3 years or 3.5 years, you will actually get a Canadian passport, which is the 3rd strongest passport in the world. It is a regulated profession. So everything that you do over here is in a boundary. It's in a limit. It is not that, okay, somebody is going to charge 30 rupees and somebody is going to charge 300 rupees for treatment. You are going to be having a very standardized approach on a treatment thing. So there's competition. Like right now where I am sitting, if I go 100 meters from here, there is a physiotherapy clinic. If I go 100 meters on this side, there is a physio clinic. But that does not mean that nobody is working. Everybody has equal amount of opportunities. Everybody has equal amount of workload or caseloads. And that thing does not need to be done in unethical ways. You don't have to feed doctors. You don't have to give money to doctors. You don't have to do commission-based stuff. You don't have to do any of those things to work upon making your profession good. plus everything is documented. Right now, what I have done right here, we have a documentation of that. So Karthik talked about ABCs of physiotherapy. Karthik talked about Into Canada. Karthik is going to be working over now, is accepting the patients in the clinic. Karthik is going to work with this. Every single thing is in a stepwise fashion. And the best part of it is quality of life. If you see the picture that is on the screen, this is a real life picture that I have taken of a lake near my house. So this is basically how beautiful Canada is. Now, to work as a physio in Canada, you will require a Canadian Alliance of Physiotherapy Regulators eligibility letter, where we will guide you in every step and every form filling from course registrations, including IELTS, till you get your letter of eligibility. Then we work upon PCE theory clearance, which makes you eligible to work as an interim physio. Interim does not mean internship. It is in between your theory and your practicals. We take your lectures in your home country. I come down to India twice a year and we do live lectures in my clinic in Mumbai. And we also have online lectures which are happening every single week. So if you miss a lecture in India, you probably can join in a lecture in Africa which is coming up online. So you're not going to miss out on any of these lectures. The next thing that happens is the PCE practical clearance, which means you become a fully licensed physio. We will assist you in Canada with practical training, licensing with provincial bodies, as well as job placement assistance with multi-city clinics, hospitals and care homes. Just like we have Apollo hospitals in India or we have Fortis hospitals in India, we have a multitude chain of hospitals and clinics in Canada as well. And when we have those things attached with us, we can assure you that, okay, I have relatives in Toronto, I want to stay in Toronto, we can give you a job there. I have relatives in Calgary or Edmonton, I want a job there. We can give you a job there because we are connected all across the country now. And if you want to earn more money, you go towards the interiors. Unlike India, where if you go to the interiors, you will probably earn less money and it is less fructifying. Whereas over here, if you go to interiors, which are remote country areas, little colder than normal, but you will earn a lot more, you will save a lot more taxes and you can earn lots over there. So it is all your choice and we will give you or guide you on those things. What do you require? You require IELTS bands, you need a valid degree and you need your identity document, which is a valid passport. That's about it. You need those things. How long will you take? As of right now, we are taking in registrations for March 2021 and November 2020. Now, November 2020, I am not too sure because we don't know if the traveling will open up by that time or no. But it is always better to keep your paperwork ready and done so that by the time if everything opens up, you can be coming here as early as November 2020. The examinations happen in March, May, July, September, November, and December. They keep on changing those months in different years. But as of right now, because we did not have the May and the July exams, we have 4 exams coming up, which is August, September, October, and November, continuously 4 exams. And practicals happen only twice in the year, which is June and November. What we will do with you, we will guide you for the documentation and registrations with the CAPR. This means everything that you will need. Where do you stick that photograph? Where do you keep the photo? How do you take that photo? What will you fill in form number A? What will you fill in line number 2? Every single detail comes to you in your email and we will give you a call and we will fill it with you. So it's not that we are going to give it to you and you're like, okay, Bardo. No, that doesn't happen. We will also work with document sourcing from various institutes. So let's suppose you are from Rajiv Gandhi University. So what document you will need from there and whom to approach there, we will guide you with that. Because up till now, we have had more than 400 clients that we have had from India. So majority of the universities and colleges, we know personally whom to go and meet. And that is how it will be easier for us to guide you that, okay, for this person, go and meet this and this person, and you will get the things done. So that is how easy we have made it now for you. Preparation for written components, we will be, as I said, we will be giving you the notes, textbooks, study materials. And the most important thing is now we have come up with 2 mock examinations. So even before you leave India, you will have given 2 exams similar to what exams happen in Canada. So you will know exactly where you stand. So if you feel that you're not prepared, you probably don't want to leave at that time. So your job is secure, your home is secure, you are comfortable, you're not coming here in a new country and struggling with life. You will come only when you are prepared, and then you will start working over here. We will also give you job referrals and placements in Canada on receipt of full registration with the province. Now, this thing has changed a bit. We can give you a job even on your interim license. And that is something that we have worked upon very hard for. And right now, so if you're going to come over in November or you come over in March, if all other paperwork is in place, you can start working as early as November 2020. That is me in a donut, but that's a different story. We are not going to talk about me here. How do you register? So these are my contact details. Do not go for the India number. The India number right now is not active. You can email us at intwocanada@gmail.com. That's intwocanada@gmail.com. Or you can call us, or you can text me. This is my personal number, which is +1 778 385 1592. If you drop me a WhatsApp message, please be mindful that my timings and your timings are different. Right now it is 9 a.m. in Vancouver and it is 9:30 over there, which means I should be stopping soon. And that's pretty much about it. This is my email and I'm going to keep it handy. And as discussed, ma'am, we are done 5 minutes before time.
Yes, Dr. Karthik, thank you so much for considering that, and you're finished exactly on time. Thank you so much.
Canada is known for that. Canada makes you punctual.
Yes. No, we too here. I'm very particular on my time. So I was kept on, looking at my time.
I'm actually surprised. I've done a lot of workshops and seminars these days, and I've seen that this is a very dramatic change that I've seen, because over here in Canada, we have this joke of IST, which is Indian Standard Time, which is always half an hour later.
Enlightening a presentation on the right way how to diagnosis in physiotherapy. And because you were started with, you're going to make the life easier way for all the physiotherapists who were participant today, right? So I think you completely, the sentence was right what you made and you finished it with that. Okay. So understanding from A to Z, it was a really, it's a new thing for me. And, I learned a lot today personally. And it was great.
I am glad that I could be of assistance to everybody.
I have one suggestion that in A to Z, you cover the entire orthopedic, neurology, and cardiothoracic. I think W can stand for women health too, because we do a lot of women health.
Well, we have a women health thing, which is about pregnancy, OBG, and pelvic floor rehabilitation.
I would request you to add the women health for W in that, water therapy and women health. So
absolutely.
That covers
I would definitely add that in my next presentation.
So that covers the entire A to Z of your the diagnosis in physiotherapy and misdiagnosis and misconceptions. It was a great presentation, and you had one of your friend is saying that, "Hi Karthik, you're going well." This is Priyanka Puranik here, and
Priyanka Puranik. Yes, I know Priyanka Puranik. She's my batchmate.
Yeah, she's saying that you are reminding me of Khatri sir. And so I thought I'll just put that to you.
So most of the teachings are from Khatri sir for sure. He was our principal in KIPT, and we have learned a lot from him.
Okay. So thank you for taking your time to speak to us today on this a very important topic. All the way from Canada and during this COVID time.
To speak.
Because Dr. Mahendra, you're there?
Yes, madam.
Dr. Sai, is that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to take any questions, because we finished on time at 9:30?
Well, I think we're running out of time and we'll have to close it up. So we'll do that.
Yes.
Okay. So if you have any questions, you have my email ID. You can always drop in a question.
There are a lot of questions which I've just taken. I think I should share it to you.
Sure.
The lot of questions which we're not able to take it because of running short of time.
When we discussed yesterday, I told you that it is not going to be in a time frame, because it tends to go overboard. But yeah, what we'll do is probably we can do an email on all these questions that we have, and I'll try to answer it to the the best possible.
Yeah, because I don't want the
I am
participant to get
also going to
upset. You
try
know, few
to.
questions have answered and few has not.
I
So
know.
we'll make sure that
But it is very difficult to do it over this type of a setup. But we
Okay.
will try to answer as many as possible. And
Yeah.
I will
Yes, sir.
try to. I'll be going through the chat as well, so I will know how it goes.
Yes, yes.
Definitely,
And
we'll try to share you more questions as and when we get it, and you can
Surely, sir.
please answer it on your name.
thanks
Definitely.
all the participants. Thanks to everyone. It was my
Thank you
pleasure
guys for
being here
being very
today.
patient and
Yes.
not doing anything on Zoom which would be disturbing. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for being patient and thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dr.
Dr. Karthik.
Karthik, for
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Karthik.
taking your time and being a part of our webinar. It's such a wonderful thing to have you spend some time with us and sharing your knowledge as well. Thank you, Dr. Radhika, also.
Thank you, Dr.
You've been a wonderful
Mahendran, for
moderator.
doing a wonderful, organizing chairman. And, it's well coordinated. Thank you so much. I should say
Mahendra
thanks
sir,
to you.
Radhika ma'am, thank you for organizing this and even
No, as you said, you need, one seminar for each A, B, C, D, like that. So I think we should come back to you with the,
I'll be
for
more than
all
happy to do that.
yes, for a single alphabet, it will take, 4 hours for you to do that, as you said. So
I
we
would be
should.
more than happy to do that. If time and luck permits, definitely we will do it for sure.
Thank you, Dr.
And
Karthik Shah.
it
Thank you
was
so
amazing
much.
to meet you guys online, and I hope and wish that in the coming days I come over in person and we'll meet together.
Yes, yes, sure. It's pleasure.
Thank
we
you
can
so
meet.
much.
Yes, thank you. Thank
Definitely.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all.